Proposition 1, the Constitutional Amendment on Repeal of Debt Ceiling for Small City School Districts. It's a complicated title, but a simple concept: fairness. Small city school districts are defined as the school districts of each city that has fewer than 125,000 inhabitants. There are currently 57 small city school districts throughout New York State, which make up 8% of all New York school districts and include about 200,000 students. Being a small city school district has nothing to do with enrollment, district size, or budget. To be labeled as a small city school district just means that their district is within a city, or their district includes a city within its borders. The New York State Constitution has different rules for small city and suburban or rural school districts. That made sense back in 1938 when the last state constitution was adopted. Back then, small city schools had different rules for their budgets and finance. But since the mid-1980s, the New York State Legislature has been working to align small city school districts with their suburban and rural counterparts. Today, small city school districts have the same budget, tax, and voting procedures as other public schools. But there is one remaining major difference for small city school districts: the debt limit. To be fiscally responsible, the New York State Legislature established debt limits for all school districts, or a limit on how much money they could responsibly borrow. Suburban and rural school districts may borrow up to 10% of their property tax base. New York City schools can borrow up to 10%. Big city school districts, like Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo, and Yonkers, can borrow up to 9%. But small city school districts can only borrow up to 5%. If they wish to borrow more than 5% of their property tax base, they have to get permission from the New York State Board of Regents, get permission from the state comptroller, and have a supermajority pass a referendum that states that the project will exceed the constitutional debt limit. This inequality is made worse by another rule that hurts small city school districts. When non-city school districts borrow money, they are allowed to subtract any applicable state aid before computing their debt. Small city school districts are not allowed to do this. Let's take a look at how that can really create an uneven situation for districts and their students. Suburban district and small city district had the same amount of students, a similar budget, and district property values of $500 million. Both districts want to do a $30 million capital project for safety and security upgrades, and both will receive $21 million in state aid for the project. Under the current law, Suburban District will have a $50 million debt limit, or 10% of $500 million. Small City District will have a $25 million debt limit, or 5% of $500 million. Already, the Small City School District has half of the borrowing power of their very similar neighbor. The cost for this project, $30 million, exceeds Small City School District's debt limit, but is little more than half of Suburban District's limit. Now, let's add in the state aid rule. State aid is money that the state will contribute to the project. Suburban District is allowed to subtract their $21 million in state aid before establishing their debt limit, which makes sense because they're not actually borrowing $30 million. They are only borrowing $9 million after the $21 million of state aid is applied. However, Small City School District is not allowed to do that. They have to include money that they won't be borrowing in their debt total. The result? Suburban District is using 18% of their borrowing capacity to do this much-needed project. Small City District is over their debt limit and must get permission from the New York State Board of Regents and State Comptroller, which takes time, must present their vote as exceeding the constitutional debt limit, and must obtain a supermajority to pass the referendum for the exact same project. Over time, Suburban District will be able to provide much more for their students and their communities. They could do 5 of these projects before hitting their debt limit, or they could do a much larger project under the same rules. In this case, Suburban District could do a $165 million project before exceeding their debt limit, while Small City District has to break up projects over several years to stay under their debt limit. Students in Suburban District could have a brand new building in the span of 3 years and remain under their debt limit, while students in Small City District would have to wait over a decade for the same building under theirs. And the only difference is one district is labeled a small city school district. You might be thinking, this sounds like a simple decision, so what's the catch? There is no catch. Schools will also still need to get voter approval for budgets and projects. Changing the Constitution will not raise taxes. In fact, it will allow small city districts to complete projects with better financial efficiency. So, what will change if this vote passes? Voting yes for this constitutional amendment is an easy way to help your neighboring communities and put small city districts on equal footing with their neighbors. Voting yes will create equality, support over 200,000 New York students, uplift communities, and fix an unintended mistake. The New York State Legislature has already passed this bill, recognizing the inequality of the different debt limits and financial rules. Now, Proposition 1 goes to New York State voters. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make an impactful change for small city school districts. We urge our community members to vote yes to Proposition 1 in the New York general election on November 7th and create equality for all New York State students in their school communities.